If you live in San Jose, you may already be aware of the shortage of police officers out on the street. The ones that are on duty are often fighting serious crimes and no longer handling transient members of the community.
You know, we need more officers, but you know what? We can only do what we can do with what we have.
Handling the homeless population. Straight ahead on Equal Time.
From San Jose State University, you're watching Equal Time, exploring new issues each week, giving equal time to competing points of view.
Hello from the campus of San Jose State University, and welcome to this edition of Equal Time. I'm your host, Journalism School Director Bob Rucker. The city of San Jose is in Silicon Valley, generally considered to be a well-to-do place. But here are also people who live a very different lifestyle. We're talking people who are transient, who have not wealthy homes, but places to live under bridges or on the banks of creeks. Carla Jimenez has our story.
In San Jose, the homeless population is in the thousands. Meet one of the people without a home, Larry Siegfried. After 6 years of feeling unsafe without the police department's help, Siegfried says he thinks law enforcement should be doing more.
I don't think they should stop us on the way we look and stuff. But I think they should not judge us either.
And for the most part, the community understands. They're frustrated. You know, we need more officers, but you know what? We can only do what we can do with what we have.
The number of people living on the streets is up by 300 compared to 3 years ago, in spite of efforts by the San Jose Housing Department officials to help the homeless. This agency's program, Housing 1000, seeks to find homes and apartments for 1,000 chronically homeless men and women. A separate program called Phase 1 cleans up homeless encampments in the creeks.
We also provide rental deposits, rental subsidies. We have close to 100 people who are receiving a monthly subsidy that were homeless and now are in homes, so they're off the streets.
An estimated 4,000 homeless people are living on the streets on any given night in San Jose, but getting into housing is not easy, as Anthony Saidi knows all too well. He's been homeless off and on for 3 years.
I want you to sit there for 6 months and do nothing and get bed bugs and deal with drama, and then after 6 months you're back on the streets. Where's the benefit? The Housing 1000 too, that's just a joke too. They're only gonna provide people for those who are the main ones who are on SSI. Those are the main top ones. The second one, anybody back does that downtown street team.
When Equal Time returns, we'll look at the question, who do the homeless turn to?
Having somebody out on the streets, you know, cycling in and out of the streets.
Also, we'll see what many of us can do in our communities to pitch in. Welcome back. We've heard a lot about the homeless and the help that they need, but what can we do? Carla Jimenez continues our report.
The recession has contributed to homelessness, but a monetary approach to giving to homeless people is not the only solution. Instead, volunteering with time or donating used furniture can help. Alejandra Herrera Chavez is with Destination Home, a nonprofit organization that works with the City of San Jose Housing Department. She says she looks for the best and the most humane solutions to get people off the streets.
So having somebody out on the streets, cycling in and out of the streets, sometimes shelters, jails, or emergency rooms, it costs us as taxpayers about $60,000 per year. And if we were to house somebody permanently and put them in an apartment of their own, the cost is actually about $16,000. So it's a significant savings.
We need to stay focused on whether policies have the intended effect of helping homeless people, or whether they might even have the opposite effect of hurting them.
Due to all the Caltrans cleanups, which they do on a frequent basis, it causes everybody to move around. This time they're getting serious. They've done some massive cleanup.
Ernesto Chaves also been living on the streets for 8 years. And unlike many of us who have places to call home, he also finds ways to contribute to society by volunteering at the Roosevelt Community Center.
All the time that I've been homeless out here, they really haven't given me a hard time. I don't do anything to get me in that predicament, I try to walk the line, try to be good because people are good to me, so in return, yeah. No drugs, no alcohol.
When we come back, we'll sit down with a panel of experts when Equal Time continues. Welcome back to Equal Time. Our focus today is on homelessness and long-term solutions. Let's meet our guests.
I'm Ron Tannehill. I'm a retired police lieutenant from San Jose.
I'm Lisa Jackson, and I'm from East Palo Alto, California, and I've been homeless for about 3 years.
I'm Jackie Morales-Ferrand. I'm the Assistant Director for the Housing Department for the City of San Jose.
And I'm Carla Jimenez, student reporter on The Story.
I thank all of you for being here today, and we're looking forward to getting some new insights. Homelessness has been an issue in America for as long as I've been around, as I can remember. Lisa, you actually lived the experience.
Yes, I have.
Tell a little bit to the audience about what that means.
Being homeless is a big deal because majority of the people, they are left to survive on their own. They have little or no resources, and surviving every day is very difficult. It's not an easy job.
Well, Jackie, you hear this a lot, I suspect. Give us a sense of what you've experienced here in this area.
Well, most recently, the City of San Jose has been putting a lot of emphasis on homeless encampments in the city. We estimate there's about 40 to 60 of them, with up to 1,000 people living outside near our creeks in large encampments. And the folks that have to live outside are really suffering from having to live outside and being exposed, especially now as we're getting into the cold season, the wetness, lack of food, lack of shelter. It's really a rough life out there, and we really need to do something about it.
And Ron, the police of our area do an excellent job, but this is a challenge. This is not easy to deal with.
It is. A lot of times the people living in the creek areas either become victims, high crime, and a lot of drugs, alcohol abuse. One of the other problems is living in the creek. They need to cook to eat, so they start fires, which puts another strain on the fire resources to respond and put those fires out. So it is an issue, yeah.
Very good. I wonder if you all get a sense that the public watching this would get the impression, well, we've talked about this and talked about this and talked about this. Why aren't there viable solutions? Lisa, let me start with you. What would be a viable solution for someone who's homeless? What can we do?
Well, first of all, everybody should be on the field. The majority of people, if they're campsites, there should be people supervising. They should at least make sure they have clean clothes, or bring by sandwiches and stuff like that. Everything really did help. I mean, the system was there. There was a lot of support throughout the community. And the problem is, I believe, as far as I know, is that there's a lot of people in the shelter, there's a lot of people outside of the shelter. So majority of people, they said, once your 30 days is up, you either get into a program or something, but there's not any easy solutions there, no. Very difficult.
And Carla, you're a student journalist on this effort. This must have been eye-opening for you.
It was. Doing this story has made me realize that there isn't a lot of awareness of what many people in the community can do to contribute in their communities by helping many of the people that are homeless, and which is basically why I really want to do the story, just to bring more awareness and really to learn about how this affects our society, especially right now with the downside of the economy.
Right, the economy is going to be an issue for a while, we suspect. Ron, do the police really want us to put the word out there to show up and bring food and do helpful things, because does that present problems for them?
Well, I think what they need to do is have designated areas they can donate food or clothing or whatever, kind of like Salvation Army or Goodwill. I think Salvation Army does an excellent job of distributing those things. It becomes an issue if they take it directly to like an encampment. You have parking issues and just access to and from.
Yeah, I would say that it's really an issue from the city's perspective to have people who are going out into the encampments or into our parks actually feeding people is really a problem. And the problem is folks want to help out and they bring food, but what ends up happening is it attracts a lot of people, it leaves trash in the area, people don't have restroom facilities in the area, and so it creates all kinds of problems. So what we really want to do is try to engage people to get engaged in established programs like Salvation Army or Loaves and Fishes or Destination Home, where people can come and get services as well, not just getting the food. The food promotes the isolation and prevents people from actually seeking out services. And so from the city's perspective, that's what we want to promote, is people accessing services so that we can assist people to get off the streets.
Now, I'm just curious. That sounded like excellent advice for the public,
Yes.
but from your ears, how did that sound?
It's perfect, it's great, it's advice, but it's up to the individual to survive. Everybody said they either lost their jobs or their homes, but they are like computer geniuses. They have skills. They know what motivation is back in the real world. As far as living outside, there's campsites everywhere, but you know, you're not welcome there because they are sick of the homeless shelter system.
Are there confrontations though? And again, most of us watching don't have no sense of what you go through.
Exactly.
So what do you actually live through when you're homeless in this area?
Overnight is hard enough, but if you don't know how to survive, you can sit with someone and they will actually teach you how to survive. So they won't let you go. If you feel like you're really sick or something, they will take you to the hospital. So, but you're gonna have to come back outside anyway and learn how to survive until you get your home back.
Now, that's the harsh reality of America in this time. What did your research show in terms of what can be done?
I have learned doing the research that the city of San Jose is helping many of these people that are homeless. For example, the housing department works with other organizations that actually put a lot of the people that are on the streets into homes. Eventually, it saves a lot of money for the state of California because they don't have to send people to clean the creeks, and they wouldn't have to, for example, if a person went into a hospital,
who's going to take care of that?
Exactly, the taxpayers, you know, that money wouldn't be going towards that, but rather for...
And the greater societal question, of course, is are we ever going to get a handle on this? Will it ever end? Do you think it's possible that it would ever end?
Well, you know, we're committed to making it end. And from our perspective, we utilize what's called a housing first model, which is to get somebody into housing so that they can stabilize their condition is the most important point, because people need a place to live, and it's easier for people to address their issues, whether it's alcoholism or it's drug addiction or it's needing job skills. That's hard to do on the street when you're just basically trying to survive. So having a home is the first step, and we're really challenged in San Jose because our housing costs are astronomical. And so the cost to build an affordable housing rental apartment really has to be 100% subsidized for somebody who can't afford anything. And so that's the biggest challenge, is where are we going to get the money in order to produce the housing that's needed?
Key point, astronomical costs. The public looks at that and says, we can barely survive on our own. And now the companies out there here in Silicon Valley, around the Bay Area, they're saying, well, we're trying to help, we're trying to do what we can, but not much is being done quickly. It's being done slowly. It's being done by church groups and mosques and synagogues. But again, the authorities have to face the realities of violent attacks and all kinds of issues and vandalism and all those things that the police have to handle. What are some of the stories that you've heard about that the police have had to deal with related to the homeless?
Well, one of the issues with the homeless is alcohol and drug abuse. So typically you get calls, you have to respond to calls involving people that are doing drugs or high on drugs, get violence in these encampments. So you have to respond to that, you know. And so it does use up resources. You were talking about the housing and having to get money to build housing units. I would think that some of the federal properties that we own, that we pay a lot of money just to maintain, that aren't even being used, could be converted to homeless shelters or facilities. That would be something to look at.
Well, we're definitely always looking to see if we can use things like surplus properties. We're looking at old motels that are underutilized to try to create housing opportunities very quickly. But the cost for the police to actually go out and do investigations, or to have to go and deal with a crime, or the hospital costs are much higher to our society. So it's much less expensive if we were to actually house somebody than it is if we have to pay for their medical care, their job, their time that someone has to spend in jail, police time. All of that is way more expensive than housing someone. And that's why we really think if we can provide housing, that's a great way to stabilize someone and to provide lots of opportunity to move forward, and much less expensive.
And I think a lot of people would look at the number of places that are available, like you're suggesting, and maybe turn them into shelters, but then who's going to pay for that? How safe are they going to be? Who's going to maintain them? Eventually, taxpayers may be called on to look at that. We've had city after city around the country in my travels who've tried to address this all kinds of ways and never have done it effectively. I'm curious to know, is the next generation got any better ideas that can help us? Because we don't seem to be able to even come close to putting an end to homelessness. Any thoughts on that for your generation?
Awareness, and just basically how you can help by contributing your time, any used items that you have, and just volunteering your time into helping other organizations.
Do students actually think that way in college?
I have not seen anyone that really actually has even thought about it, and then this is pretty much why I wanted to cover this story, because I realized that there isn't a lot of awareness with students.
Well, one of the nice things, you organized this and you gave a human face to the issue. Homelessness is a term until you actually talk to a human being who's living it. You say you work for the government by day, but you still are homeless at night?
Yes, I do. I'm a media press representative for the United States Coast Guard. My background would be based in poverty. I was born in 1964, so there weren't homeless shelters there either. So we lived in low-income housing. My parents, they all worked up. I'm like the fifth child of my parents, and we had several homes, so we haven't lost any. Homes are still on the market. So when I look back at my background, it's not really the home, it's the economy. I mean, my great-grandmother, they survived. They said she should move on in life, you know. And basically, you have to be prepared. I mean, for the future, you have to be prepared.
Well, we have church communities and all kinds of civic groups and young people, youth groups, doing wonderful things to help.
And give back to the community.
And give back to the community.
If you are successful of leaving and continuing on, they would like for you to come back, volunteer, give your time. Patience is, I have lost a few friends that were homeless, women. So the government came back there and they told me they can give us a women's shelter. So they gave us a women's shelter in Los Angeles, but they didn't, the population, the majority of women, they will not be there. So.
Mm-hmm. And then the government and housing authorities, more is expected, more is expected, more is expected. How does that work for your colleagues, the people trying to make something happen? Mm-hmm. Can you handle all of the requests?
We absolutely cannot handle all the requests. With the disillusionment of the redevelopment agencies over the past year, which was a primary funding source for housing, not only locally but across the state. Now that that's gone, we're going to need to find a new permanent source for affordable housing, because that's going to be a key issue, is how do we fund it? We don't have the resources now. We need to start thinking about how to get them, because the problem is just getting bigger.
Very good. And you invited Ron to join us to talk about the police perspective. He's a retired policeman. What else did you find out in your research?
I found out that although he was on the police
32 years, I think you
right.
said?
Mm-hmm. Things have definitely changed.
How so?
First of all, the economy. A lot of cops are not on the streets anymore. Mm-hmm. Crime rates have gone up. And I wanted to kind of see the perspective of what it was like when he was in law enforcement and compare it to today's world.
And do you see law enforcement changing its philosophy towards the homeless, or do they see it as it's just a continuous issue we have to deal with, but we have other things to do as well?
Well, it's changed dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years. You see a lot more homeless people. They're more visible. They're on the streets. You have to deal with them, you know.
But I'm thinking internally. In the police departments around the Bay Area, around the country, is there a mindset, it's just something we have to deal with, so we will, but we have other things to do? Or are they looking for unique ideas and ways to help address this issue?
Well, they have to prioritize their responses to calls for service, and it's not a real high priority. Naturally, they're going to go to calls for service that are of emergency basis first, and then on down the line. So the homeless situation is kind of at the bottom of the pile, so to speak. Mm-hmm. One of the...
I mean, that's the perception a lot of people get.
Right, yeah, and that's true, because, you know, you have more calls for service that involve, you know, violence or require a police response, whereas the homeless issue isn't something that's constantly up and in your face type thing. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue for the police department is having a place to take these people when they encounter them. We used to have a mission over on Julian Street between First and Market, and that was a place that we could take people who were kind of down and out and needed some help. So you had a place that you could take them. Now it's really limited in terms of places that you can actually take these people and get them some help when they're down and out.
Okay.
And I think that's the key, because we don't want homelessness to be criminalized. We don't want to create less opportunity for people who are already struggling. So if the police arrest someone or they want to give them a ticket, I mean, that doesn't solve the problem either, because either they're going to go to jail, which is expensive for all of us, or they're going to give them a ticket, and you have to have an address in order to have the ticket sent to you, and if you're homeless, you don't have an address, and so where does the ticket end up going? But nowhere. So a police response we don't think is the most effective response, although certainly the police are a good partner with us in identifying people and really providing resources like you did in the past. I think that's a great role for the police department to have, but we really don't want to criminalize the activity that homeless people are sometimes engaged in, because it doesn't solve the problem long term.
You know, recently I was talking to a medical person about something totally different, and they kept emphasizing for me that in the medical world, they work on preventative medicine as opposed to crisis management. You want to try to prevent it from getting to that phase. If you take that mindset and you put it into the homeless issue, the crisis in America, it would seem the corporations need to step up. But most importantly, there are people who are homeless who are qualified, who could still work, who could still find jobs. What is it that we can do in society to motivate people to want to seek jobs, want to go get training, knock on doors and insist on, and train me because I have something to offer?
True, true. I believe they should leave the door open, the shelter door open, or any door that anybody needs an opportunity in. We have our welfare. We can make it with that. But majority of people said they would return to school or seek employment. And I believe in them because I am one of them. I've made it too.
But are you aware that there are some people who think you've given up? People who are homeless don't try hard enough.
Well, no, I don't believe that.
You don't see that, you don't experience that. Because I know every time our students go out to do stories about the homeless, and we do these every year, we always find people with qualifications and backgrounds and experiences that would suggest with a little more help and a little more patience and attention, this person could move back into society, into business, and be successful. Have you had that experience yet where you've knocked on doors and tried to find out why businesses or the homeless have not been able to connect with businesses?
In my experiences, I found that many of them are still very, they have goals and they're determined. They don't want to be seen as someone that's not intellectual. They don't want to be seen as someone that is a criminal. And that's
They want the dignity of being respected.
Right.
Which is what we all want. But when you try to get that point across to people who could be helpful, you're going to hear about budgets and costs and expectations and needs, and it's just too much of an investment of effort. Is that a slap in the face to your efforts and when you're trying to find solutions?
Well, the more that we can all recognize this as a problem that's a community problem, it's a problem that the students can address, employers can address, people who live in the community, but we all need to work together to find an effective solution. And we have a program called Destination Home, which is a partnership between the city and county and nonprofits and the community, which is focused on creating a plan on how we're going to solve the issue of homelessness in the city and county.
Those are the kind of things we have to build on.
We have to build on those efforts.
When I hear stories that even faculty are living out of their cars sometimes at universities like ours, that's something we have to address. But I thank you all for helping to put a face and content and information on this very important issue. And I thank you for listening in. We hope you'll come back for another edition of Equal Time.